This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data, and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Emily Tate, Managing Director at Mind the Product. Emily, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific, Emily. Thank you for coming. So, at this very moment, somewhere on the planet, app developers teams are working on new mobile apps. Some of them are thinking through features of those apps, others ready to launch them on the App Store, yet other teams are already marketing those apps to acquire users. It is nonstop, and you bet all these teams believe their apps are only capable to bring good to this world. Now, did you watch the Black Mirror TV series on Netflix?
Of course.
The connection between the movie and the app development process? Well, patience. On this episode, among many things, you will get the answer. But first, Emily, let's kick off the episode with talking about you first. Tell us about your background.
Yeah, so I am Managing Director for Mind the Product. We're a community of product managers that aims to make product people more successful. From my background, I've been a product manager for over 15 years. So I started off building apps for or software for airlines that help run kind of the operations of airlines, and then moved into building a traveler-facing app, consumer app, and then eventually into doing consulting for product, helping multiple other companies build out their own products.
Nice. Airlines. So what airlines, by the way?
So I worked for a company called Sabre Airline Solutions. So we serviced over 400 airlines of varying capacities around the world. My product, the product I had kind of, for the most part, actually was very popular in India, the Middle East, and Asia, and it was kind of business analysis software.
Gotcha. All right. Now, if you don't mind, pun intended, let's talk about Mind the Product. Tell us about your company. What mission do you have?
Yeah, our mission is to make product people more successful by coming together to further our craft. And basically, what we look at is product is a very soft skills focused type of role. So it's not a kind of thing that you can start from point A and go to point B the same way every time. So with that, being good at product management means learning a lot of different tools to have in your tool belt, and being able to know when to apply those different tools to solve different problems. So it's not something that's very easy to learn in like a single book or a single training. So we basically grew out of a community of product managers who basically were looking to connect and solve problems together, and help each other figure out how to do this thing that there was really no rule book for. And now we've grown into a community all around the world with meetups and conferences and content and a membership program that helps product people excel.
So you're saying you have to have a set of certain skills as a product manager, but you have to be ready for surprises because every project will bring you surprises, and there's no way you can be ready for all of those in advance.
Right. It's one of those fun things where you can have a problem that looks similar, and the tactic you used to solve it the time before will not work this time. And so being able to kind of be flexible and really ask the question, like, what problem are we trying to solve? What information do we need to solve it or to make a decision? And how are we going to get that information? And basically taking those questions on cycle and getting that next bit of information, which then asks the new question. Now, what information do we need to make a decision? And kind of basically the tactics you will use to get those answers may be different in each situation.
Right. So reminds to me like, growing your own baby. There's no way you can get ready in advance to every surprise that comes to your way. And yeah, even though you may believe you're ready, but yeah, every time is different and every time is a challenge.
Definitely. And I think it has the same kind of underlying thing of all of that has to be guided by a set of underlying principles and values and kind of who you are as a product, who you are as a company. Same thing with parenting. You kind of have your set of principles of like, who we're like, we know the shape we're trying to craft this
Yeah,
human into.
basically.
Exactly how we do it may shift each time.
Right. So now, across the span of your career, can you single out a project, a single one that is your favorite and you would love to work on it again?
Yeah, or a single project for me. Um, I would probably have to say, so when I was working with TripCase, a travel management app, so it's a consumer app that you can manage your itineraries in. We were one of the launch apps on the Apple Watch when it came out. And it was a really fun project, both from the perspective of obviously getting to play with new shiny technology, something that hadn't been out there before, but really starting from the ground level of figuring out what is the use case for a smartwatch in the context of travel, which opened up a lot of discussion and a lot of thinking around how could this help travelers? What are the blue sky possibilities? What are all the different ways that this could be used? And dreaming of that future and then having the opportunity to turn it into something actual. I think some of those use cases didn't quite come to fruition like we thought they might, but it was still a really fun journey to be on.
Yeah, I bet. Because if I remember correctly, I mean, back then when Apple Watch was launched, there were many assumptions what would be the use case for the device. A lot of apps were launched, a lot of big applications for iOS launched their versions of their all those apps on Watch OS. But by now, if you check the App Store, you'll see that not many apps of wearables are still there. I mean, the versions of the iOS applications. It's because the use case by now is more or less known. It's for the most part, it's about health. It's about messaging probably, but health it's like the number one. But back then, I bet it was just pure exploration endeavor, right?
It definitely was. I remember kind of getting the first, so Apple Watch was kind of the main one, but we also were working on several different partners and smartwatches. And like everyone was looking for the killer app. Everyone was saying like, what is the thing? And when I got my first Apple Watch and my friends would say, what's the thing that like, why am I going to buy this expensive smartwatch? And I remember kind of sheepishly saying like, honestly, the most useful thing to me is getting my text messages on my wrist so that like, I don't have to pull my phone out and I can just see see who just sent me something or see notifications and help triage. And we all wanted there to be like just these life-changing different kinds of use cases with smartwatches. And really, I think a big part of it as well was like Fitbit had already been around for a long time. It wasn't in smartwatch form, but it was in wearable form.
Right.
And everyone kind of didn't want the killer use case to be health because Fitbit kind of already had that. And we want this to be special. But at the end of the day, that really is, especially for me, I know it's health and notifications are the killer apps of smartwatches, which isn't the sexiest thing, but valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking this question wearing my Apple Watch on my wrist, and for me, when I hear that people may not may have an opinion that healthcare is not a big enough reason for Apple Watch to exist, my answer would be, hello, your health, it's important.
Yes.
If that's the only reason for Apple Watch to exist, that's the big enough for me. So yeah, I totally get the idea, and I hope that as time goes by, Apple will improve the hardware even better to make it even more useful and pick up even more signals about your health and bring more value.
Like we went to discount health, but I think about, my dad has some heart conditions, and actually his doctor recommended he get an Apple Watch, which would then allow him to actually start to reduce some of his heart medications because they could see the real-time signals faster. And like, that's huge. That's changing. That is life changing for him. And it's interesting for me to see my heart rate like that. It's still a good thing regardless.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of big scale research in medicine were done only thanks to Apple Watch, because all of a sudden medical institution could launch researches that were just not were just impossible before Apple Watch. You couldn't recruit tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands people to participate in a project before. It was just not feasible. Now let's switch the gears a little bit and talk about the difference between working on the mobile project and mobile app project and web app project. What's the difference between these two from a project management perspective?
The app industry is vast. To navigate this space, you need a directory to look up suppliers and partners, and you need to know who are the best. Visit our marketplace directory at businessofapps.com/marketplace/podcast. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, from product management perspective, I think kind of there's a lot of the similar things. You're still asking the question of what problem are we trying to solve? I think the main thing when you think about mobile apps is you're also asking like, what form factor are we solving for? Are we solving this on? And what is the context that they're going to be using it in? Because, even obviously with laptops, you can be mobile, you can go places, but you kind of know that people are sitting down. They probably have Wi-Fi. They probably have decent Wi-Fi, hopefully. And you can kind of better predict the environment in which they're going to be using your product. With a mobile phone, they might be sitting on their couch, they might be on a train, they might be running through an airport, they might be in a park while their kids are doing other things. And so you kind of have to consider multiple use cases and multiple scenarios in which they can use it. The other big aspect is data availability. So you cannot assume with a mobile app that data is always going to be available. And there's nothing more frustrating for a user than opening an app that really has no reason that it needs to be connected to the internet and not being able to use it because you don't have internet connection, or you have weak internet connection right now. And the truth is, a lot of the world still doesn't have 4G, 5G availability broadly. So we need to be building apps in ways that they can be used regardless of the network connectivity you're going to have.
Yeah, we're living in an interesting world. In some parts of the world, you can expect 5G to be full rolled out by now for millions of users. In some areas, people are still dreaming about 3G, even though it's kind of like a decade age technology, but it's not there yet. By the way, what do you think about web apps right now? Do you see any use case like having a first-hand experience? What would be the use case for web apps today? Any specific categories? Like what's the reason for this existing today?
For web apps in general?
Yeah.
I think there's lots of there's lots of use cases for web apps, particularly kind of using them on a laptop, even using web apps on a phone, on a mobile device. I think that the use case is less to me about the end user on the web app use case and more about the kind of some of the development things that you can do. So it's a trade-off. It's a sacrifice of some of the native functionality specific types of things versus what you can do within a web app. But when you build a web app, you don't necessarily have to build 4 different versions of that app to reach all of the different kinds of platforms that are out there. So I think that that's kind of the use case. I think is a little bit speed to market when it comes to web apps, to be able to get the most broadly distributed app scenario.
Got you. Now, if you think about it, the single characteristic you can attach to pretty much all big mobile app projects since their inception in the Silicon Valley would be an optimism. People implemented ideas into apps like they're living in the ideal world, where none of those apps can be used by bad actors. What would you suggest young entrepreneurs to be mindful about from the day one to not regret about months or years later.
Definitely. We all want to change the world. And that's kind of, it became the Silicon Valley trope of like, we'll be changing the world through
Rocking the world.
our mobile game. And we do. We start off from the assumption that like everything is going to be fine. I have good intention. The thing that I always encourage people to do is to basically intentionally think about the bad actors and to go through a process. And the question that I like to ask is like, what would trolls do? What would the worst people on the internet do with my product to find a way to cause harm? And in many, many cases, there are things that can be used to cause harm. There are lots of examples out there of things like domestic abusers using Nest thermostats to basically torture their mate by either turning the heat way up in the summer or making it super cold in the winter while they were out of the house and locking them out of the capability to change it. You've seen smart home technologies be used to monitor partners and different people. You see, there was a case where Strava, in a very seemingly innocent feature of showing a heat map of where people were running around the world, actually exposed military bases in the middle of war zones. And like all of these things are like, it was a good thing. It was nothing intended to be bad, but it can be used for harm. And so we have to proactively think about those things. So I know, when I was building some features with TripCase, we started looking at some of the things at the time. Of course, social was really big, still is. And one of the most obvious features that we could do was to make a button that would say, hey, like post on Facebook, I'm traveling to California today and super excited about it. And we started thinking about it and started realizing that we were broadcasting that someone was not going to be home onto their social media, which then you could easily see where someone could use that to say, okay, they're not going to be home. This is the time I'm going to go break into their house. Other things of that, because there were some people wanted to kind of make it like automatically post that you were traveling. It's like, okay, I am traveling to a city. I'm traveling to Cupertino. Okay, who might you be going to talk to? Are you interviewing for a new job? Are you going to talk to a company that you might be acquiring that now somebody can go and speculate on your stock? And there are all these use cases where it's like automatically posting that somebody was traveling. It didn't take very long to think about how that could go poorly. So we basically just decided not to do it. We made things where people could share if they wanted to, but as an auto feed of posting, there were too many ways that it could cause harm.
Yeah, absolutely. In my mind, there's this even more dare case pops up, which is the world famous tech journalist Kara Swisher used to provide this example when she was in the Facebook headquarters, and she was right in the moment when the company was about to release a live broadcasting feature. She was asking them, guys, what if somebody would try to broadcast some awful things like shooting somebody or stuff? And she was basically laughed out of the room because you're too pessimistic. People will not be doing that. Years later, the horrible mass shooting in New Zealand, we all remember that somebody was doing that shooting and broadcasting live on Facebook. So be very carefully. The bigger audience you're getting for your app, the more responsibility you get, the more thoughtful you should be about the externalities we're just discussing right now with Emily. It's a big responsibility when you're reaching so many people at the same time and letting the information flowing between them on a just humongous scale.
Definitely. I think that there's another element as well, though, which is like, of course, the easy examples to go to, and I just fell into this as well. Like it's really easy to point to the negative, the bad actors of live streaming a mass shooting or accidentally exposing military bases. But I think the other danger that we have is that most of us are not doing things that have that level of impact, that have that kind of, so it's easy to dismiss that and go, that's Facebook's problem. That is Nest problem. That my app is not going to have anything of that sort. But you think about things like we had a speaker at one of our Mind the Product conferences named Mariah Hay from Pluralsight, which is a learning platform. Sounds pretty innocuous. Like you can't really do much harm with that, can you? They started looking at some of the features that employers were asking them to put in around being able to see the test scores of their employees who were taking these self-paced learning courses through Pluralsight. And as they started digging into interviews more, they realized that what some of these companies were wanting to do was use this as a portion of the evaluation of who gets promoted and what projects they get put on. And her team started talking about it and realizing that, like, we are setting our product up to cause harm and be the reason that somebody doesn't get a promotion because they didn't make a good enough score on their optional learning course. And again, decided not to build the feature. They built some other stuff. They got the employer the things that they needed to be able to, justify their L&D investment and those kinds of things. But by having those conversations up front of like, how could this go wrong? How could this be used in a way that weaponizes my product against our users? They were able to make a different evaluation.
Yeah, that's a great point and great example, Emily. And for listeners, this is the moment when I promised you just a few minutes ago that we're going to be covering a question that is related to Black Mirror TV series. So if you just Google up on Netflix, I guess the TV series were premiered on 2018, and just check out any episode on that show and you will see exactly why I'm bringing that show to this episode as an example of this is the actual Black Mirror. Check out the movie and see what how things can go bad with some, good intentions initially, but, the outcome is pretty horrible. But we're just, we've covered the question, what are we suggesting to people who are at the beginning of the road of creating an app? But even a tougher question, what would you suggest to people who are launched the app, have gained the momentum, and now it turns out that they didn't think about possible externalities, but they are there? What can you do except just saying, what was I thinking about?
For me, I think first start like admitting that you made a mistake is step one. And I think that we are so hesitant to do that. You see it all the time. The companies are like, we didn't do anything wrong, or try to excuse it away. Like, well, we really meant to do fine. And there's no way we could have seen that. Like, I think it's okay to say, you're like, we didn't see this coming and it didn't go well. The other thing I will say is you may not be able to fix the harm that has already been caused, but you can prevent further harm. So turn off the feature. Like if you have something that you realize is being misused, don't spend too much time trying to talk yourself out of why this harm is okay to have or why it's just one edge case. Like shut it down. Just stop anyone else from being harmed until you can figure out how to mitigate against that. I think that that's kind of the biggest thing. From there, depending on the situation, a lot of it's going to be about then how can you repair the harm, or how can you apologize for the harm that you've caused? Because pretending like it didn't happen is not the option. It's not the right thing to do ethically. It's not the right thing to do, even just from a PR perspective, to make sure that people know that like we take this seriously, and to start to rebuild some of the trust, because that's the other big piece is you will have lost trust with your customers, with the market, with the media, and like taking the steps that you can to make inroads to rebuilding trust will be important.
I've heard these pretty famous rules of crisis management, basically 3 parts: acknowledge the problem, take responsibility, and try to overcompensate the problem. If you can do all these 3 parts, you're a really good manager, you're a really good leader of your company. Okay, last time I checked, there were 5.4 million apps, both App Store and Google Play, Android and iOS apps. So when somebody today is taking and creating a new app, what would you suggest her or him to consider to create an app that actually can have a chance to break through this competition, to be found, to be seen, to make a difference in people's life?
this is where I feel like my product management side comes in, because really it starts by understanding your users, understanding the problem you're trying to solve, and doing the user research and discovery up front to make sure that you're solving their problem in the right way. And I think that for a long time, everything was just build an app. Like anything that we wanted to do, it was like, well, clearly we're going to start by building an app. But first of all, ask yourself, is an app the actual thing that we need? Is that the right thing to solve this problem? Once you kind of get into that, it's all about getting your product out there and finding the users to start using it, to give you feedback, and to be those influencers for you. So to be the ones who will share your product on their social media, who will give you the reviews in the App Store, because I mean, there's a reason that every podcast, every app, anything that's out there in these ecosystems asks for the 5-star reviews, because that actually does help with your discoverability in the app stores and helps you kind of get into those things. I will also say, as much as you can, particularly if you are going into Google Play and into the Apple App Store, do the things that you can to see if you can get featured as an app. I have had apps that have been featured in the App Store that we saw our downloads spike and shoot way up. And a lot of those users ended up retaining as well. I've seen podcasts that get that kind of featured spot in the podcast store, and all of a sudden it shoots way up and their subscribers triple. And so like those promotions do help. They can be hard to get. You need to kind of like work the contacts and kind of be a little bit scrappy within that. But when you can, they pay off. And then I think the other big thing is like build a good product. At the end of the day, there are a ton of apps out there. Many of them are terrible. A lot of them, even like if you look for a given type of app, you may find 48 different apps that do the thing that you want to do. But when you look at the reviews and when you try them out, 47 of them don't live up to the promise. So if you take the time and the energy to kind of build the best thing that you can, and make sure that you're solving an actual problem for users who need their problem solved in that way, you're giving yourself the best chance of success in the App Store. Like with any product out there, you can do everything right and still not break through. So I think that's the other big thing, is to remember that, what's the stat with businesses? Like 80% of new businesses fail. I suspect for apps it's probably even bigger than that. So give yourself some grace if things don't immediately take off the way that you would like them to. But all that you can do is kind of set yourself up for success the best way you can.
Yeah, that's a really great advice, to be ready not only for the success, but for a failure. But that may not be a failure. Your expectations were unreasonable. Do like as bad as you can. Have a great strategy. Don't be scared off by the numbers that just given to you. 5.4 million apps. It's just a number. If you do the market research, just like Emily said, you may realize those other apps are not really doing the great job. They're missing the target, and you can do better. Okay, we've just covered the major topic on the table. That was the first part of the show. We're transitioning to the second part, which is a small one. And this is the place where I get a chance to ask every guest on the show just a very few quick questions, so the people who are listening to us can know you better. Here we go. Question number 1. What smartphone do you have now? Have you been switching between these two big camps, iOS and Android, or just staying one side?
Yeah, so I'm an iPhone user right now, fully locked into the Apple ecosystem. I have not always been. So I started off with iPhone. Well, I was an early iPhone user. I switched to Android actually due to some international travel and the phone plans that you could get that would give me international data. So for about 2 years, I was on a Google Pixel. And then when I moved to London in 2020, I switched back to iPhone because of iMessage, because my family can text me with iMessage for free.
I see. So back to the family, back to Apple's ecosystem. what was the first mobile phone, before the smartphone era?
Oh, my first mobile phone was a Nokia. Um, oh, I used to know the number. I want to say like 6500. I could be wrong, but I was really proud of it because it had the buttons that were the easiest to play Snake with. Um, and so,
That's
uh,
important for sure.
and actually, that would be the first cell phone that I actually wanted and I liked. Um, but before that, I had a car phone. Showing my age a little bit, that actually was like in a bag, connect you plugged into the cigarette lighter and had the antenna that you'd have to pull up in order to get signal. So that was actually my first.
Oh my gosh, I bet you could use that smartphone for self-defense. That was really bulky. Uh, okay, getting back to present. Um, Imagine you left your home and left your smartphone and you're sitting on the table. What would be the most missing feature for you when you're out?
I'm gonna give two answers because they're kind of related. Very utilitarian. One, I live in London, and so City Mapper as an app is my best friend, which helps you. It's basically Google Maps, but very, very good at navigating public transportation. So I can always see, even if I'm going from my home to the office, I will regularly look at City Mapper just to see if any tube lines are delayed or down, or if I need to make any changes. So City Mapper would be one, but then also Apple Pay, because I never pull out my credit cards anymore. Everything here is contactless. And so I just use Apple Pay for everything.
Gotcha. Now, when you're looking at your iPhone right now, probably there's something that is missing for you. Could be hardware, software. And when I say missing, I don't mean specifically something, doing something more, some extra feature, probably, um, something that helps you to keep the balance better with your device in your life.
Yeah, I the thing that there is an app that I was put onto several years ago that helps me keep balance, particularly. So I have ADHD. I have trouble focusing. A smartphone is a terrible temptation when I'm actually needing to get stuff done because I can always find something to procrastinate with on there. And there's an app called Forest, so like the woods, that it's basically a focus timer. So you plant a tree in quotes, you plant a virtual tree and say, I'm going to focus for 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever you want. And you hit start. And then if you go back to your phone in that time, you kill the tree that you were growing. And if you hit that time, then the tree grows and you have it in your garden on your little app. It's completely cheesy, completely ridiculous, but I use it during the workday all the time to say, okay, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes getting through my emails, and I will pick up my phone and I will see it there. I'm like, I don't want to kill my trees, so then I'll set it back down and go back to what I should be doing. So
That's a terrific concept. I thought only the regular timer app exists for timing your work, but actually that's an even better idea. Not just showing people the seconds that are going by, but giving them a reason not to touch the device for a certain period of time. All right. Before I let you go, just very, very final question. How can people get in touch with you and know more about what you do?
yeah, you can find me on Instagram or Instagram, Twitter. Well, you can find me on Instagram too, but it's less interesting there. Twitter at the Daily M, so the Daily EM. And then you can find us on at mindtheproduct.com, just like Mind the Gap, like the London Tube, but Mind the Product.
Yeah, remember, mind the gap. This is what you remember from a London stew. All right. Thank you for coming on the podcast and spending time with us, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And that was Emily Tate, Managing Director at Mind the Product. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe. You will be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please, don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.